I realize it is a bummer to hear my voice right now and not Tom Vecchio's because Tom did such a good job, as always, filling in for me the past 10-ish days or so here on the Solo Shot and on the MLB DFS Q&A. So you're bummed. I get it. As a consolation here to try to make things up, as if I am a delinquent parent coming back from vacation, I have brought you a gift to hopefully ease things over here. And it is a split slate podcast for today, breaking down both the main slate and also the very early only slate for today on MLB DFS over on FanDuel.com. So no, there's no Tom. I apologize, but at least we get a couple of slates to break down here for today. Welcome on into the Solo Shot. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Here to break down both the main slate and the very early only slates for today over on FanDuel.com. If you're listening to this right now and early enough, make sure you check out the timestamp in the episode description over on numberFire.com because lock for the very early only slate is at 12:10 p.m. Eastern. So if you're listening after that, feel free to tune out after the main slate discussion is done. But if you're listening earlier than that, want to get in on the very early only slate, check out the episode description, see what the timestamp is there, jump ahead, and then come back to the main slate after getting your lineups in. So I'll start the main slate and then go through the very early only slate after that. So plenty of it coming up later on today. But first, a quick reminder to make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts, because tomorrow we got some UFC coming up. I've got NASCAR for Indianapolis as well. And NFL just around the corner, twice weekly via myself and Brandon Gadula recap podcast, Monday preview podcast on Thursday, each and every week. So make sure you're subscribed on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed to get notifications as each of those episodes go live. Hey, baseball fans, MLB is putting on a one-of-a-kind event with the Field of Dreams game between the New York Yankees and Chicago White Sox today. FanDuel is giving fans a chance to get in on the action with the $5 Field of Dingers promotion. All you have to do is opt in and place a minimum of $25+ on a 3+ leg same game parlay for the 2021 Field of Dreams game. You'll receive a $5 bonus in side credit for each home run hit in the game by both teams. Relive the magic of the Field of Dreams by heading over to FanDuel today. Must be 21+ and present in Colorado, Iowa, there you go, fitting, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, or West Virginia. Bonus issued is a non-withdrawable site credit that expires in 7 days. Max bonus $35. Terms apply. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Colorado, 1-800-522-4700. In Iowa, 1-800-BETS-OFF. In Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. For confidential help in Michigan, 1-800-270-7117. In Tennessee, call the Red Line, 1-800-889-9789. Or in West Virginia, visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net. Let's start things off here with the main slate for today with lock set to go at 7:05 p.m. It is a 4-game slate and does include that Field of Dreams game we discussed earlier on. And just want to go quickly over the field for that for today. There is apparently a 12-foot wall in center field for today. It might be corn. I don't know. We'll see how that works out. But there's allegedly a 12-foot wall in center field. It's supposed to be modeled after Comiskey Park. It is 400 feet to center, 339 feet to left and right field. And those dimensions, if you're looking for like a comp from a park perspective, are very similar to Busch Stadium in St. Louis. The wall, not quite as high there, but it is 85 degrees with 71% humidity. So that's good weather for home runs. I'm going to view it as being like mostly neutral in terms of park factor. That could be off, but we will see how things break down. I would value the thoughts of someone like Derek Carty, who does good park factor work. Obviously, it's a guessing game. We don't know the dynamics of how the wind will play there, et cetera, et cetera. But as of right now, I am assuming this game will play somewhat neutral in terms of park factor for today. So that is my baseline assumption for that Field of Dreams game between the Yankees and the White Sox. There is no big weather to note for today. So pitching preview for this slate, Lance Lynn is the highest salary pitcher on FanDuel at $10,300. He is starting in that Field of Dreams game. Shohei Ohtani is $10,100. German Marquez is $9,000. And Jose Barrios is the only other guy above $8,000 at $8,500. And it's not just those four guys. There are tons of great pitchers on this slate. We also have Andrew Heaney, Yu Darvish is here. We talked about him. There are a lot of good pitchers available for today on this main slate. Most of those really good pitchers, though, are in tough matchups. The big exception is Yu Darvish, and that'll put him at my the top of my list here at $9,200. He's facing Arizona, which is it's been a rough offense for a long time, but really rough right now. They have an 80 WRC plus versus righties based on their current active roster with a 125 ISO. That ISO is easily the lowest on the main slate. The strikeout rate for Arizona has also been creeping up. It is up to 25% versus righties now. And Darvish is pitching really well again. He has a 31% strikeout rate since he started to sprinkle in more curveballs, lowering that slide usage a bit, increasing his curveball usage. Seems to be working out so far. He had a 12 strikeout game, his most recent start, and that was against this very same Arizona offense. And that does mean they just saw him. So that's a negative for sure, but I'm not sure how much it'll matter given how rough they are and how good Yu Darvish has been. So I think that Yu Darvish is the top guy here on the main slate. I'm willing to put him there despite the repeat matchup. Repeat matchups do matter. They matter a bit less when it's a team as bad as Arizona. So for right now, I am good with using Yu Darvish for today, despite the fact that it is a repeat matchup. I'm going to put Lance Lynn second on the list right now, and I may change that depending on what people smarter than me think about the park factor in Iowa. Thankfully, we have plenty of time to digest this. I'll hopefully have had more information on this before our Q&A show at 4 p.m. for today, but as of right now, it does seem like roughly a neutral park. That means that Lance Lynn is someone we can use in DFS. The matchup is not bad. The Yankees did perk up a bit after the trades for Joey Gallo and Anthony Rizzo, but with Rizzo being out, they're an offense we can target once again. The active roster has a 95 WRC plus versus righties, and that includes Gallo's full season numbers. So although he was not with the Yankees when he put up those numbers with Texas, they do still count when you look at the current active roster, which is something you can view over at fangraphs.com. So not an above average offense, and Lynn is pitching pretty well. That's despite the fact that the velocity on his 4-seam fastball has been down over his past 9 starts. Hasn't mattered. In that time, he still has a 28% strikeout rate. He's letting up hard contact just 31% of the time, and the results, not shockingly, when you get strikeouts and have a low hard hit rate against, have been really nice. He has a 3.12 ERA. He has not let up multiple earned runs, or he has let up multiple earned runs in just 3 of his 9 starts. And he's only done that once in his past 7 outings. He hasn't really had like a pop game from an upside perspective in terms of strikeouts, but the building blocks are there. The building blocks for a big strikeout game are a high pitch count, high strikeout rate, decent matchup, and he has all those things here today. Goes deep in games, got a good overall strikeout rate. He's not a terrible matchup, and if we do need to worry about park factor, I will shift elsewhere. We'll adjust in the Q&A show later on today, but based on what we've got right now, I will put Darvish first and Lance Lynn second for my pitching ranks for the main slate for today. So that is where we're at for right now, and I do feel like that's probably going to be where things stand later on as well. As far as the stacks go, the top stack for me, at least, is a no-brainer. That is the Padres against Taylor Widener, and that is not a shot against Widener. He was awesome against this team last week. I bet the under on his strikeout prop. Did not make it because he had 7 strikeouts. He was awesome, and I think that labeling the Padres as being the top stack on the slate is more so a reflection of how many good pitchers are on the slate than anything to do with Widener. As mentioned last week, 7 strikeouts in 5 innings against this very same team, and he cruised, especially early on in that game. He has a 29% strikeout rate in 5 starts since Widener rejoined the rotation, which is just a really good number. The problem is the rest of the stuff in his profile. His walk rate in that time is 12%. He's letting up a 43% hard hit rate and a 48% fly ball rate. And that's why even that good outing last week wasn't a disaster if you stacked against him, because he let up 2 home runs. He also let up 2 homers against the Pirates in his first start after the All-Star break. So it's not perfect by any means. From a stacking perspective, we do want to target lower strikeout pitchers because we want to maximize balls of play. Strikeouts are the one event where you can't score points. but I think it's the best we've got here. And I'm good with the Padres, whether they activate Fernando Tatis off the IL or not. He'd be an awesome boost, obviously, but they have enough depth here to be stackable even if he can't go quite yet. So the Padres definitely at the top of my list for today from a stacking perspective on the main slate. Second will be the White Sox. It's a very similar situation to the Padres where they're facing a high strikeout guy, but everything else says we can stack them for today. Facing Andrew Heaney, he has a 28% strikeout rate since his curveball usage increased, which is a very good number, but it comes with a 41% hard hit rate and a 44% fly ball rate. That led to dinger issues even when he was in pitcher-friendly parks, which is why I'm okay stacking him here despite not really knowing what the park factor will break like at the Field of Dreams Park for today. If you can let up homers in Los Angeles and elsewhere, you can probably let them up in Iowa as well. And the strikeouts haven't really hurt the upside against him because if we look at the 8-star sample with the increased curveball usage, his ERA is 6.97. He's let up 4+ runs in 5 of those 8 starts. He's let up multiple earned runs in every single one. And yeah, the White Sox have not been as automatic against lefties recently as they were before, especially like the past couple weeks. They've not been great versus lefties. They've let us down a couple of times, but it's still for the full season a 110 WRC plus versus lefties and a 190 ISO. And you look at the individual batters here, especially now where they're at, they should be a team we should be willing to stack when they're facing a lefty. So I am very into the White Sox here, despite the fact it is not a perfect situation because Heaney gets strikeouts, because they've been trending down a bit versus lefties. I still think, all things considered, they are the number 2 stack on the slate behind the Padres. I will say, though, I'm not sure how high I'll be on Luis Robert. He didn't show much power before his injury this year, didn't show a ton in his rehab stint either, but he has been much more powerful as a hitter in his career against lefties than righties. He gets that for today. He's $2,900. That's not a bad salary, but it's also right by Cesar Hernandez and Andrew Vaughn. And both those guys have had great numbers against lefties this year, especially from a power perspective. So I'm going to wind up preferring those guys in this range. If you're giving me like a mid-range ranking for the White Sox, I'll have both Cesar Hernandez and Andrew Vaughn above Luis Robert, despite the fact that he's been better against lefties. So they're going to rank higher for me. I will get to Robert just because he's $2,900. He's been good versus lefties. Did have a hard hit ball a couple nights ago. So I'm going to get to him, but I will get to those guys first in terms of how I'm going to rank the mid-range options in this stack for tonight. Do you want to give the dinger calls for the main slate for today? Just because why not? I don't think I'll do them for the very early only slate, but let's do them here for the main slate. The boring dinger call for today will be Eloy Jimenez. I love what he's been doing since he came back from the IL. He's been disgusting. Gets a platoon advantage, gets a guy who lets up home runs. So Eloy Jimenez, the boring pick for today. The fun one may not count as fun because he's a pretty good hitter, but he's not the top guy on his team, depending on how you want to view things. So I'll go Jake Cronenworth. And I think that, again, you could say that's not super boring, but hey, my podcast, my rules. Welcome back. I do think that Cronenworth will go yard for tonight against Widener. So the home run calls for today, Eloy Jimenez versus Heaney and Jake Cronenworth versus Widener for today. That wraps up our main slate discussion. We're going to transition now to the very early only slate, which means if you are listening to this after lock at 12:10 p.m., we'll see you tomorrow or talk to you on the Q&A later on today. But the very early only slate is a 5-game slate, which locks at 12:10 p.m. Eastern. It's a kind of a unique one because we have the first game of the doubleheader between the Mets and the Nationals. Usually we don't get that first game of a doubleheader, either game of a doubleheader, on a slate on FanDuel. They will take those out of the slates and not let us worry about them. But because the game became a doubleheader after slates are posted, they just kept it out. So note, before using players in that game, it is just a 7-inning game, and it does lower the appeal of every player in that game a pretty decent amount. So just note that the Mets and Nationals game is a doubleheader and will be just 7 innings for tonight. There is a chance of rain in Cleveland as they host the A's. Not a super high chance they should be able to play, but it is worth checking back on later on. Pitching preview for the very early only slate. Brandon Woodruff checks in at $11,000. Chris Bassett is $9,900 and Kyle Hendricks $8,800. Nobody else above like 75. So it's a pretty big drop off after those three. And Woodruff, to me, the top guy by a wide margin. The one reservation you could have with Woodruff is the Brewers have said they plan to conserve their pitchers for October. We've seen this happen with Freddie Peralta specifically, and it makes sense. These guys, Woodruff, Peralta, Burns, are the reason the Brewers are in this position to think about October when we're only in August. They have not piggybacked Woodruff yet. He's been going deep in games, and they could. But I think some circumstances help us still use him here. The main one is that they don't have a lot of options. The main guys they would use in a piggyback role are Adrian Hauser and Eric Lauer, but they're both on the COVID IL. So is Josh Hader, and it's put a dent in their pitching depth. They definitely could still piggyback Woodruff at some point. They've got a 7-game lead, so they have a cushion to do so. But they might choose to do that once they've got more guys back from the COVID IL. And that does up our confidence in Woodruff a bit. It's still a risk and it's still something to consider, but it does increase our confidence in him. And he's really good. He has a 27% strikeout rate over his past 10 starts. That is all after the sticky stuff discussion began. He's allowing just a 29% hard hit rate and a 31% fly ball rate. Woodruff is facing the Cubs here. They are basically just a shell of a team. We saw Corbin Burns just torch them last night, and Woodruff is on that level right now. So I think even with the concerns about potentially having less length out of Woodruff right now, he is still the top guy on the slate. He is still worth $11,000. So Brandon Woodruff, to me, the number one pitcher for the very early only slate. Number 2 is Chris Bassett, and I've been out on him for a while because his numbers did take a dip after the sticky stuff discussion began. But to Bassett's credit, he's adjusted. He's really cut down his sinker usage over his past 4 starts, and it's a bad pitch for DFS. It's just a bad pitch in the real world, too. His whiff rate on his sinker is 16%. Every other pitch is at least 22%. The xWOBA against that pitch is 364. So the fewer sinkers Bassett throws, the better from a DFS perspective and from a real-world perspective. And it's led to good outings with the sinker slowly being on the decline. He's had at least 7 innings in 3 of his past 4 starts. He's had 8 strikeouts twice, and one of the 8 strikeout games was against Cleveland. That game came back on July 18th, so there's enough separation there to not worry about familiarity in this situation. The salary on Bassett is high at $9,900, but I am fine with that. So I do think that he's very worth it in this spot, and I will put Bassett second behind Woodruff for the very early only slate. As far as the stacks go, the one I like the most is the A's facing Eli Morgan. He's starting to get some strikeouts, so it's not like a no-brainer to stack the A's, but I do like it a decent amount. Morgan's strikeouts have been on the rise over his past 7 starts. He didn't have great velocity in his first 2 starts in the big leagues this year, so the past 7 paint a more accurate picture of what he's doing right now. He has a 25% strikeout rate in that time with a 3% walk rate, and that's good. His skill interactive ERA is 3.92, very similar to Lance Lynn, actually, but his ERA is much more lackluster at 4.97. The batted ball numbers explain why there is a gap between the skill interactive ERA and the results. He's letting up a 39% hard hit rate with a 56% fly ball rate, which is a great recipe for home runs. He hasn't had a massive home run issue in this time, but Morgan has let up multiple home runs in 3 of those 7 games, and there's hot weather for today. It's a good, powerful offense he's facing despite having no Ramon Laureano. So I think there is enough here to feel very good about the A's despite Morgan's increasing strikeout rate. Now, the one complication with using Brandon Woodruff is that he's $11,000, which means we've got to find some salary savers. The 2 guys here who best do that are Sean Murphy and Seth Brown. Murphy has a salary of $2,400. Brown is at $2,100. Both these guys have big fly ball rates and ISOs over 200 versus righties. So I think that you start with those 2 guys. Start with Murphy, start with Brown, assuming that they play, and then go from there. I think that you plug them in with Woodruff and see which studs you can afford, and you should be able to get to some good guys once you plug them in. So I'd start there, start with those value plays, and go from there. Another guy who struggled a bit with home runs recently is JT Brubaker, which I think means we can stack the Cardinals against him. Brubaker has been throwing more curves and forcing fastballs recently at the expense of his slider, and it's not working. His batted ball numbers have slid in the wrong direction. The strike rate has gone up, but just a smidge, not enough to wipe out the rough moves elsewhere. He's also had some walk issues recently, which means that a homer that he does allow can be a multi-run innings. You walk a guy, let up a dinger, that's going to lead to some issues pretty quickly. The Cardinals are not great, but they do have individuals with upside here. So I'm fine checking them out and seeing if Brubaker's issues with hard contact continue. It does help that Brubaker's batted ball data is pretty even against righties and lefties, though the ground ball rate is higher against righties. So I would be okay giving a bump up Dylan Carlson, the main switch hitter here, but the true upside guys are all righties. I am fine holding them in high regard because of Brubaker's relatively even numbers against both righties and lefties. So I'd be fine being high on them. If you want more value, I would check out some of the Pirates guys. Rodolfo Castro has some pop. He's $2,400. You could potentially go there. I'm okay with the Mets. I mean, Eric Fetty started the first game, which has not been confirmed yet. We could potentially check them out. But if you're looking for the true top stacks, give me the A's and give me the Cardinals for today. That is all that we have here for today on the solo shot. But as mentioned, we are back once again at 4 p.m. to break down the main slate. So if you want to check out the main slate, talk about that, swing back by at 4 p.m. Eastern to talk about that over on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. If you have questions for me, I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you once again to Tom Vecchio for filling in for me over the past 10-ish days. And Tom will be, I'm sure, filling in at some point in the very near future as well. Thank you, Tom. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck for you today, both of the very early slate, the early only slate with the main slate. We'll talk to you all again in the very near future. This has been the solo shot right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.